The morning light slipped through the tall arched windows of the Lee mansion, falling in golden streaks across the marble floors. I stood quietly in the grand hall, dusting the silver frames that lined the walls, each one holding a memory that wasn't mine. The portraits of Lee Su's ancestors stared down at me with the same intensity that sometimes glinted in his own dark eyes. My name is Bo Gum, and for the past 3 years I've lived and worked here as the mansion's live-in maid. It sounds fancy, like something out of a drama, but the reality is quieter, lonelier, and much heavier than anyone might imagine. I wake before the sun rises, dress in my crisp black and white uniform, and start my daily chores before anyone else even stirs. I've always been small for my age, fragile people say, though I don't like that word. My hands tremble when I'm tired, my skin bruises easily. When I first arrived, the head butler looked at me like I might break one of the porcelain vases if I wasn't careful. But I proved myself diligent, quiet, reliable. And though the CEO never said much, I could tell, he noticed. Mr. Lee Su, the cold alpha, the man whose presence could still my breath from across the room. He rarely spoke to me unless it was to issue instructions. Bo Gum, polish the study by noon. Bo Gum, bring me coffee, black, no sugar. His voice always carried that same low authority that made my stomach twist in both fear and something I couldn't name. And yet, beneath his detached tone, there was a gentleness that sometimes slipped through, like when I burned my hand once while serving tea and he'd taken the teapot from me, his brow furrowing just slightly. Be careful, he'd said. Only that. But his touch lingered for a moment longer than necessary. Since then, I found it hard to breathe normally whenever he's around. Today was no different. The air in the mansion felt heavy, the kind of heaviness that comes when the master is home early from work. I was dusting the shelves in the living room when I heard his footsteps. Slow, firm, deliberate. I straightened immediately, my fingers tightening around the feather duster as he entered the room. His black suit fit him perfectly, his tie slightly loosened as if he'd just returned from a long meeting. His eyes, dark and unreadable, found me instantly. Bo Gum, he said. Yes, sir, I replied, lowering my gaze. He moved closer, his presence filling the room. Did the laundry come in from the dry cleaners? Yes, sir. It's folded and placed in your wardrobe. He nodded slowly, his gaze lingering. Then, for reasons I couldn't comprehend, he tilted his head slightly, his eyes sweeping down my uniform. The skirt is a little short, he murmured. Is that the one I told you to wear? My heart jumped. The uniform that he'd asked me once, out of nowhere, to wear a lighter, shorter version of the maid outfit. Said it looked neater. But later, I overheard the cook whispering that the CEO himself had designed it after seeing it in a magazine. It was mortifying, and yet, I wore it because it was his request. Yes, sir, I whispered. You said this one looked more presentable. His lips curved, not a smile exactly, but something close. It does. It suits you. The words were simple, but my face grew hot instantly. I turned away, pretending to fix the vase on the shelf, but I could feel his gaze linger, like a warm weight on my back. Finish your work and take a rest after lunch, he said finally, and his tone softened just enough to make me glance at him. For the briefest second, our eyes met. There was something there, something I didn't understand. A flicker of warmth, quickly masked by his usual cool expression. Then he turned and walked out, his scent, a faint trace of cedar and smoke, lingering in the air. My knees felt weak. That evening, after dinner had been served and cleared away, Madame Lee, his grandmother, arrived home from her usual social club. She was an elegant woman, full of energy despite her age, and she adored her grandson, but she was also determined to see him married. It was all she ever spoke about. Bo Gum, she called as I arranged the flowers in the sitting room. Come here, dear. I bowed politely. Yes, madam? She smiled warmly at me. You've been working hard, haven't you? Such a sweet boy. I truly don't know what I'd do without you in this house. Thank you, madam. Her expression softened even more. You know, my grandson could learn a thing or two from you. Always so stiff and serious. That's no way to live life, or love. Her words made me blink in surprise, but before I could respond, the front doors opened again. Lee Su entered, glancing between us with quiet curiosity. His grandmother clapped her hands together in delight. Oh, perfect timing. Su, come here. I have something to tell you. He looked wary instantly. Grandmother, if it's about... Yes, marriage, she interrupted firmly. I've made arrangements. You're 29 already, and I won't wait any longer. I've invited a lovely young man named Kim and Su to stay here for a while. You'll get to know each other. I froze. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut through. Lee Su's jaw tightened. Grandmother? No objections, she said briskly. He'll arrive tomorrow. You'll treat him kindly, is that understood? Lee Su sighed but didn't argue further. As you wish. Then his gaze shifted, briefly, to me. It was subtle, but something in his eyes changed. I couldn't tell if it was frustration, sadness, or something deeper. I lowered my head again, trying not to look as though I had heard too much. That night, I couldn't sleep. The mansion was silent, the kind of silence that carried its own heartbeat. I lay on my narrow bed in the servants' quarters, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts a tangled mess. Why did it ache, just a little, to think of another man staying here with him? I had no right to feel anything. He was my employer. I was just the maid. A fragile omega who polished his floors and folded his shirts. And yet, when I thought of him smiling at someone else, my chest ached. Somewhere down the hall, I could faintly hear the creak of a door opening. His room, perhaps. Footsteps moved across the corridor. Then silence again. I turned on my side, clutching the blanket tighter. Maybe tomorrow, everything will change. The morning arrived with a crisp stillness, the kind that makes every sound echo slightly through the halls. I woke before dawn as I always did, and washed up quickly before slipping into my uniform. The skirt brushed lightly against my knees as I tied the apron around my waist. My reflection in the mirror looked the same as always, pale, quiet, unremarkable. Except for my eyes, they looked restless. I told myself it was because today the new guest would arrive. By the time I reached the grand hall, the staff were already preparing. Fresh flowers had been arranged on the entrance table. The scent of lilies and white roses filled the air. Madame Lee moved briskly around the space, directing the butler and cook with her usual authority. "Beau Gum," she said as soon as she saw me. "Ah, good you're here. Make sure the guest room next to my grandson's suite is spotless. I want Mr. Kim and Sue to feel perfectly at home." "Yes, madam," I replied softly, bowing. Her smile softened. "You always do things so delicately. I can always count on you, dear." I nodded and went to finish preparing the room. It was bright and elegant, cream-colored drapes, a large bed with golden sheets, and a view of the garden from the window. As I set the last pillow in place, I heard the faint sound of car wheels on gravel. My heart skipped a beat. He was here. From the top of the staircase, I saw him enter. Kim and Sue looked like someone out of a magazine, neatly styled hair, expensive clothes, a smile that could charm anyone in seconds. Madame Lee greeted him with open arms, delighted. "Welcome, my dear boy. I'm so glad you could make it." "It's an honor, madam," he said smoothly, bowing slightly. His voice was warm, practiced. Then his eyes flicked toward me. "And who might this be?" Before I could answer, Madame Lee said proudly, "That's Beau Gum, our live-in maid. Sweet boy, always taking care of everything here." He smiled at me a little too wide. "Ah, I see. You're cute, almost like a doll." I didn't know how to respond, so I simply bowed. "Welcome, sir." He chuckled, then turned back to the madam as if I were a decoration. Moments later, Lee Su appeared at the top of the stairs, his expression unreadable. His suit jacket hung loosely over one shoulder, and his gaze swept across the scene below with quiet detachment. "Grandmother," he greeted politely. "Sue, come down and meet Sue properly," she said cheerfully. "You two will be spending a lot of time together." Lee Su descended the stairs slowly, his steps measured. When he reached them, he extended his hand to Sue. "Lee Su." "Sue," the other replied, shaking his hand firmly. Their eyes met, an unspoken tension flickered there. I couldn't tell if it was discomfort or rivalry. Probably both. The next few days unfolded quietly, but I could feel the shift in the mansion's air. Sue followed Lee Su around whenever he could, at breakfast, during tea, even in the evenings when the CO tried to work in his study. I continued my chores as usual, pretending not to notice, though my heart betrayed me each time I passed the study door and heard Sue's laughter from within. One afternoon, I brought in a tray of tea for them. As I stepped inside, Sue was leaning over the desk, far too close to Lee Su, pointing at something in a document. "Mr. Lee, you're really dedicated to your company," he said lightly. Lee Su looked bored. "It's my job." When he saw me enter, however, his eyes flicked up. "Beau Gum, over here." I walked forward carefully, setting the tray down on the table. His scent, wood and spice, brushed faintly against my senses, making my heart flutter. "You can pour," he said, voice softer now. I did as told, focusing on the slow pour of amber liquid into his cup. My hands trembled slightly and I could feel his gaze on them. "Thank you," he murmured. When I turned to serve Sue, the man smiled teasingly. "You're very obedient, aren't you? I can see why the madam likes you so much." I gave a polite nod and excused myself, escaping before my unease showed. Outside the study, I paused and let out a shaky breath. Why did his words feel like little needles under my skin? Later that night, after the staff had gone to bed, I went to the kitchen to tidy up. The moonlight poured through the windows, silver and soft. I thought I was alone, until I sensed someone behind me. Still awake. I turned quickly. It was Lee Su. He stood near the doorway, his hands in his pockets, eyes unreadable. I was just cleaning up, sir, I said. He nodded slowly, stepping closer. You worked too hard. I lowered my gaze. It's my duty, sir. Even at this hour? He asked, his voice a quiet rumble that made the air feel warmer. You should rest. Something in his tone made my throat tighten. I could feel the heat rising to my cheeks. I will soon, I whispered. He stopped just a breath away. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the ticking of the old clock and the faint hum of the refrigerator. Then, unexpectedly, he reached out and brushed a speck of flour from my cheek. His touch was feather-light, careful. There, he murmured. My pulse stuttered. Thank you. His eyes lingered on me, and for an instant, the mask he always wore, the one of the cold, untouchable CEO, seemed to crack. There was warmth beneath it. Something fragile, almost hesitant. Then he withdrew his hand, the moment breaking like thin glass. Good night, Bo Gum, he said quietly before leaving the kitchen. I stood frozen, one hand pressed to my chest. My heart felt like it would burst. The next day, Madame Lee gathered everyone in the dining hall. She looked especially pleased with herself, which never meant good news. I've decided something, she announced. Since Sue will be living here for a while, I think it's best that you and Sue spend more time together. You'll share breakfast and dinner, and I want you to attend events as a pair. Lee Su's expression didn't change, but I saw the faintest twitch in his jaw. That's unnecessary, grandmother, he said. Nonsense, she declared. You need to open your heart, my dear boy. Who knows, you might find yourself falling for him. Sue laughed softly, resting a hand on Lee Su's arm. I'll do my best to win him over, madam. Something inside me twisted sharply. That evening, I was dusting the corridor outside Lee Su's room when I heard raised voices from inside. I told you I'm not interested, Lee Su said, his tone icy. Oh, come now, Sue replied, the sound of his footsteps approaching. Your grandmother wants us to try. Why make it so difficult? Because I don't want to lie. There was silence and then a laugh, low, mocking. Maybe you're not interested in anyone at all. Or, a pause. Maybe there's someone else. The door opened suddenly and I nearly dropped my duster. Sue stepped out, smirking slightly when he saw me. Oh, Bo Gum, he said, voice dripping with amusement. Eavesdropping? No, sir, I stammered, bowing quickly. He chuckled and walked away. You're adorable. I can see why the staff like you. As he disappeared down the corridor, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I froze. Bo Gum, came Lee Su's low voice. I wasn't listening, sir. I promise. He sighed softly. I know. When I dared to glance up, his expression had softened. Don't let him bother you. I nodded weakly. Yes, sir. For a moment, he seemed to want to say something else, but then he simply brushed past me, his scent lingering in the air. That night as I lay in bed, my heart refused to calm. I could still feel his hand on my shoulder, his voice in my ears. I knew it was foolish. I was just a maid, an omega born with too much softness in a world that valued strength. But when he looked at me like that, it felt like I existed for more than just serving tea and sweeping floors. And yet, tomorrow would come again, and he would be the CEO, and I would still be the boy in the maid's uniform who tried not to fall in love with him. Still, I whispered his name into the darkness, so quietly that even the night couldn't hear. Lee Su. Days passed, and the mansion began to feel like a stage set for someone else's story. Every corridor, every breakfast table, every polite laugh between Lee Su and Kim In-soo seemed rehearsed, performed for Madame Lee's hopeful eyes that I kept to my duties, polishing silver that never dulled and folding linen that already lay smooth. Still, my thoughts refused to obey. They kept drifting toward the alpha whose gaze lingered just a heartbeat too long whenever our paths crossed. The garden, late afternoon that I was pruning the rose bushes when a shadow stretched beside me. Careful, a deep voice murmured. You'll cut yourself. I looked up. Lee Su knelt next to me, the sunlight catching in his dark hair. He reached for the stem I held, his gloved hand brushing mine. The contact was slight, yet it sent a tremor all the way to my throat. I'm fine, sir, I whispered. He studied me for a moment. You always say that. His eyes softened. Without warning, he plucked a stray leaf from my hair, fingers ghosting over my temple. My breath caught. The world tilted into silence except for the rustle of petals. For a heartbeat, I thought he might lean closer. Instead, he straightened, mask returning. You can rest early today. Then he turned and walked away, leaving the faint scent of cedar in the air and my heart beating like wings against glass. That night, Madame Lee called me into the sitting room. She was stirring juice into 2 crystal glasses, humming. Bogum dear, she said sweetly. Would you be a darling and bring one of these to my grandson and the other to Mr. and Sue? They've worked hard today. Yes, madam, I replied, taking the tray carefully. The liquid shimmered faintly red as summer fruit. I thought nothing of it then. Upstairs I found Mr. and Sue first. He was lounging on the couch outside the study, phone in hand. Ah, more juice? He asked lazily. Yes, madam asked me to bring it. He glanced at the glass, then smirked. Honestly, I'm not thirsty. You drink it for me, won't you? So the old lady thinks I did. I shouldn't. Oh, come now. His tone sharpened. It's just juice. To avoid trouble, I nodded. All right. I lifted the glass and took a small sip, just enough to satisfy him. He smiled, pleased, and waved me off. I carried the remaining glass to Li Su's study. He was seated at his desk, the glow of the lamp gilding his features in soft gold. Papers lay scattered, his tie loosened, sleeves rolled up. He looked up as I entered. Bogum. Madam sent you some juice, sir? He accepted the glass without question and drank half in a single motion. Thank you. I turned to leave, but suddenly the air in the room shifted, heavier, warmer. My pulse quickened. The scent of his pheromones, usually faint, thickened subtly in the air like spice and smoke. Bogum, he said again, voice lower now. Wait. I faced him, confused. Sir? His eyes were darker than usual, the pupils wide. Come here. My feet obeyed before my mind could protest. When I stood before him, he rose slowly from his chair. The difference in our height felt dizzying. His presence filled the space around me like gravity itself. Your face is red, he murmured. His fingertips brushed my cheek, tracing the outline softly. Are you unwell? I don't know. My voice trembled. It feels hot in here. He inhaled sharply, as if struggling for composure. It's not just the room. Before I could understand, he leaned closer, so close that our foreheads nearly touched. His breath mingled with mine, warm and uneven. Li Su, I whispered. Something broke then, the fragile restraint between us. His hand slid to the back of my neck, gentle yet certain, and his lips met mine. The kiss was tentative at first, a brush of warmth and disbelief. Then deeper, urgent, trembling. My hands clutched at his shirt, feeling the strength beneath the fabric, the steady thrum of his heart against my palm. Time unraveled. The room blurred into a haze of breath and heartbeat and the faint taste of fruit from the juice we'd both drunk. When he finally pulled back, our foreheads stayed pressed together. His voice was rough, almost pleading. Tell me to stop, he whispered. I can't, I breathed. Please don't. His arms tightened around me. The closeness felt like a storm held just at bay. His scent, his warmth, the tremor in his hands as he brushed my hair away from my face. We didn't cross the final line that night, but the world tilted enough to make return impossible. Every touch lingered, every shared breath felt like a confession. When he finally let go, he looked down at me with eyes softer than I'd ever seen. You should rest, he murmured. I nodded, though my knees barely obeyed. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed, fingers touching my lips. The air still hummed faintly with his scent. Whatever had happened between us had changed something fundamental, something neither of us could admit out loud. The next morning, the house buzzed with quiet tension. Madame Li seemed cheerful as ever, oblivious to what had transpired. Diane Su, however, looked irritated, watching me far too closely during breakfast. When Li Su entered, his usual composure had returned, but when our eyes met across the table, a faint, hidden smile flickered there. It was gone before anyone could notice. That evening, as I passed the study, his voice called softly, Bogum. I stepped inside. Yes, sir? He closed the door behind me. For a long moment, he said nothing, just looked at me as though memorizing every line of my face. About last night, he began. I swallowed. I'm sorry. No, he interrupted gently. Don't apologize. He moved closer until our hands brushed. I shouldn't have, but I can't pretend it didn't happen. My chest tightened. What does it mean then? He hesitated, then reached up, tracing the edge of my jaw with his thumb. It means I'm losing control around you. My breath shivered. Then don't lose it. He smiled faintly. Too late. And then he kissed me again, slowly, deeply, like a promise and a confession all at once. This time there was no rush, only the aching sweetness of finally belonging somewhere, even if only for that moment. When he pulled away, the world outside the study felt impossibly far. He rested his forehead against mine. You make it hard to stay the man I'm supposed to be. You're already kind, I whispered. Even when you hide it. His laugh was quiet, almost sad. You see too much, Bogum. Later that night, I lay awake again, heart still echoing with his touch. Somewhere in the mansion, a clock chimed midnight. I pressed my palms over my face, whispering into the darkness. Please, don't let this be a dream. Morning light spilled across the marble floors like gold dust. Every corner of the mansion seemed quieter than usual, as if the walls themselves were keeping our secret. I'd spent the whole night awake, replaying his kiss in my mind, the warmth of his hand at my neck, the way his breath trembled just before our lips met. It felt both impossible and inevitable. Yet when I saw him at breakfast, sitting beside his grandmother and across from Kim and Sue, he looked every inch the cold CO again. Crisp suit, measured tone, eyes unreadable. Only when his gaze flicked briefly to me, barely a heartbeat, did I see the faintest trace of the man from last night. After the meal, Madame Lee summoned me. Her smile was sweet but sharp. Bogum dear, I have a special errand. And Sue has been feeling tired. Please bring this tray of fruit juice to his room. And take another glass to my grandson. It's important they both drink it. My stomach tightened. Something about her tone made me uneasy, but I bowed. Yes, madam. The tray shimmered with 2 crystal glasses, red as sunset. Upstairs, Sue was lounging by the window, scrolling through his phone. Juice again? He sighed. Yes, madam insisted, I said quietly. He eyed the glass, then shrugged. You drink it for me. She'll think I did. My chest tightened with the same unease as before, but I nodded and took a sip. The taste was sweet, almost too sweet. My skin tingled faintly. When I carried the second glass to Lee Sue's office, the scent of cedar and ink filled the air. He looked up from his papers, eyes softening when he saw me. Bogum, he said, standing. You look pale. I'm fine, sir. Madam asked me to bring this. He accepted it, drinking half before setting the glass down. Thank you. I turned to leave, but the floor seemed to tilt beneath me. Heat rose through my body, curling low in my chest, quickening my breath. Bogum. His voice sounded distant, wrapped in warmth. The air thickened with his scent, stronger now, sharper, like smoke and rain colliding. I feel strange, I whispered. He was beside me in an instant, steadying my shoulders. You're burning up. His palm pressed against my cheek. His skin felt cool compared to mine. The contact sent sparks across every nerve. Sit down, he murmured, guiding me toward the couch. I'm sorry, I breathed. I don't know what's... Shoo. His thumb brushed the edge of my jaw. Just breathe. The room spun softly around us. I could hear both our heartbeats, uneven and loud in the quiet. Then he hesitated, his lips a breath away from mine. Bogum, I can't. You already have, I whispered. Something inside him gave way. His mouth found mine, gentle at first, then deeper, desperate. My fingers curled into his shirt, pulling him closer as the world narrowed to the sound of our breathing. The kiss stretched and softened, slowed into something tender. His forehead rested against mine, his breath trembling. I should stop, he murmured. Then don't, I said, barely audible. He smiled faintly, sad, reverent, and wrapped his arms around me. The closeness felt like a confession whispered without words. His hand moved to my hair, stroking slowly. I could feel his heartbeat through his chest against mine. We stayed that way until the air cooled and our pulses steadied, until the strange heat faded, leaving only warmth. Later, when the haze had lifted, he drew back, eyes searching mine. Something's wrong, he said quietly. That drink. Before he could finish, a knock sounded at the door. Madame Lee entered, her expression too bright. Oh, you're both here, she said cheerfully. Did you drink the juice I prepared? Lee Sue's eyes narrowed. What was in it? Her smile faltered. Just a little help from my herbalist. You two need encouragement. Encouragement? He repeated coldly. I lowered my gaze, shame and confusion washing through me. Grandmother, he said evenly, you overstepped. She looked startled, then contrite. I only wanted you to be happy, Sue. You're so alone. He exhaled slowly, his tone softening. I know, but not like this. Her eyes flicked to me then, to the way he still stood close, one hand lingering protectively at my shoulder. A realization dawned, followed by surprise, then quiet acceptance. Oh, she whispered. So it's not Sue you care for. Lee Sue didn't answer, but his silence said enough. Madame Lee nodded once, voice gentler now. Then perhaps fate worked in a different way than I intended. She left us in silence. I turned to him, heart still racing. She'll hate me for this. She won't, he said firmly. I won't let her. He reached for my hand, threading our fingers together. Bogum. I don't know when it started. Maybe the day you burned your hand on that teapot. Maybe earlier. But I can't pretend anymore. My eyes stung. You mean that? He leaned in, pressing his forehead to mine. Every word. The kiss that followed was softer, slower, full of everything we hadn't said aloud. His hand cupped my face. My eyes fluttered shut as warmth flooded through me, steady and real. When he finally pulled back, he smiled, a rare, quiet smile that reached his eyes. "Stay," he said. "Not as my maid. As someone I can hold without hiding." Tears slipped down my cheeks before I could stop them. I nodded, voice barely a whisper. "Yes." That night, I fell asleep in his arms, the rhythm of his breathing steady against my ear. Outside, the rain began to fall, soft, cleansing, endless. For the first time in years, I dreamed of mornings filled with light instead of loneliness. The following days moved like a quiet dream. Every morning, I woke to the soft thrum of Lee Su's heartbeat against my ear. Every night, I fell asleep to the sound of his voice reading reports in the dim glow of his study lamp. That IT felt almost ordinary, except that I'd never known peace could feel so extraordinary. But peace in his world was fragile. One evening, as autumn wind rippled through the balcony curtains, Lee Su returned from work early. His tie was loosened, his face shadowed. "There's something you should know," he said, setting a folder on the coffee table. Inside was a series of documents, corporate reports, letters, and a single medical form. My breath caught. "In Su," he said quietly, "was part of grandmother's arrangement. She thought marrying him would keep the company secure. But he was hiding debts, deep ones." I looked up, confused. "So, he used her?" He nodded. "And he tried to use you too. He planned to take advantage of your closeness to me." I felt cold all over. "I didn't know. I swear." He crossed the space between us in 2 strides, cupping my face. "I know you didn't. You're the only person in this house who's ever been honest with me." His thumb traced my lower lip gently, a quiet reassurance. "You never had to try to win me. You already did." Something inside me broke open at his words. I leaned forward, resting my forehead against his chest. "I thought I was just someone temporary." He pulled me close, wrapping his arms around me. "You're not temporary, Bogum. You're home." That night, the world outside vanished. The city lights flickered through the glass like scattered stars that we kissed in the half-dark, slowly, searchingly. There was nothing hurried about it, only the soft insistence of 2 people who had already lost too much and were afraid to lose again. His lips brushed the corner of my mouth, the bridge of my nose, my eyelids. That I touched his cheek, feeling the faint tremor there. "I'm scared," I whispered. "So am I," he admitted. "But if it's with you, I'll risk it." Our kisses deepened into wordless promises. His hands traced my back, careful and reverent. I felt the warmth of his breath against my skin, the rhythm of his heart steadying mine. It wasn't desire that guided us, it was trust. By the time dawn touched the horizon, we were tangled together, quiet, safe. Weeks later, the mansion no longer felt like a cage. Madame Lee had fallen ill, but she softened toward me in her recovery. Once, when Lee Su stepped out to take a call, she motioned me closer. "You've changed him," she said. "He used to smile only for the cameras. Now he smiles for you." Her eyes glistened. "Promise me you won't let that light go out." I bowed my head. "I promise." One evening I began feeling unwell. Dizzy spells, nausea that came and went. Lee Su insisted I see the family doctor. When the results came back, he looked at me with wide, stunned eyes. "Bogum," he breathed, voice trembling, You're going to have a child." The world tilted. My lips parted, but no words came out. "A child?" I whispered. He nodded, tears glimmering in his eyes, tears I'd never thought I'd see. "Our child." I covered my mouth, half laughing, half crying. I didn't think that was possible. He knelt in front of me, pressing his forehead to my stomach. "Miracle or not, I'll protect you both." As months passed, the house filled with quiet joy. Lee Su built a nursery himself, painted walls a soft blue-gray, filled shelves with books instead of business trophies. That he no longer attended every board meeting. He came home early, cooked dinner with me, sometimes burning rice but laughing at himself for it. Sometimes I'd catch him looking at me across the table, that same soft look in his eyes, the one he used to hide behind cold distance. "You're staring again?" I'd tease. He'd smirk faintly. "Just memorizing you." On the night our son was born, rain fell against the windows like music. When I first heard the baby's cry, a sound both fragile and fierce, my heart clenched so hard I thought it might break. Lee Su held him with shaking hands, eyes shining with awe. "He has your eyes," he whispered. I smiled weakly. "Then he'll never lose his way." He looked at me then, pure devotion in his gaze. "You've given me everything I never knew I wanted." Months later, I often found myself on the balcony, watching the city lights flicker below. Sometimes, Lee Su would come up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist, pressing a soft kiss to my temple. We'd stand there in silence, just the sound of our child sleeping inside, the world moving quietly around us. "Do you ever regret anything?" I once asked. He shook his head, lips brushing my hair. "Only that I didn't find you sooner." I turned in his arms, touching his face. then you've already made up for lost time. Our kiss that night was soft, unhurried, familiar. The kind of kiss that felt like coming home. Years from now, when I look back, I'll remember this. The mansion that once felt like a prison became the cradle of a new beginning. The man who once hid behind coldness learned to love like fire, steady, quiet, unstoppable. And me, a boy who had nothing, found everything in the warmth of his hands. Because sometimes, love doesn't arrive like a storm. Sometimes, it seeps in like light through broken curtains, slow, certain, and saving.